best diet for PCOS is the Mediterranean diet. Hi, I'm Cara Craddock, a registered dietitian, and today I am going to explain why I say that, the research that supports the Mediterranean diet and PCOS, and how to actually implement the Mediterranean diet in your everyday life without having to become a personal chef or spend a bunch more money on groceries. First, where did I even come up with this idea that the Mediterranean diet is the best for PCOS? Well, that is actually the recommendation for most types of PCOS, according to the International Evidence-Based Guideline for the Assessment and Management of PCOS. They collected all of the existing research on different types of diets in PCOS patients, and what they found was that the Mediterranean diet is actually what seems to manage and even sometimes reverse most of the symptoms of PCOS better than any other diet or diet plan. This is Penelope. She is my 14-week-old new puppy, and she really likes to chew on cords. So I'm gonna hold her in my lap for a while so she stops chewing on the cord for my lamp. Specifically, some of the symptoms of PCOS that the Mediterranean diet has been shown to address are: one, insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a big driver of PCOS, and PCOS can actually be a driver of insulin resistance as well. The Mediterranean diet has also been shown to have some benefits in managing infertility, irregular periods, abnormal hair growth, and belly fat that can often come along with PCOS. Now, there are slightly different recommendations for PCOS diets according to what type of PCOS you have. But for types A and B, and I think even type C, the Mediterranean diet is actually what is recommended. And then type D, they actually recommend you just follow the dietary guidelines for Americans. And the dietary guidelines for Americans actually include the Mediterranean diet as one of the healthy dietary patterns that can work with the DGAs. So ultimately, following the Mediterranean diet can be a really useful plan for everyone with PCOS. Now, if you're not sure what type of PCOS you have, another one of my videos help you figure out which type of PCOS you have. And once you figure out which type you have, it can be really useful in figuring out a plan that is really personalized to your experience of PCOS. Now, I will link that video right up here, but also down in the description of this video as well. In this video, though, we are going to dive into the Mediterranean diet. PCOS is not only a reproductive condition, it is also a metabolic and an inflammatory condition as well. Most people with PCOS are also experiencing some level of insulin resistance, no matter their weight. That insulin resistance may or may not be all the way to prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. What that insulin resistance really means is that your body's tissues, your body's cells are just not responding to insulin as well as we think it should be. And when your body is not responding to insulin as well, your body starts to make more insulin. Another thing that high insulin levels do is they trigger cells in our reproductive systems to produce more androgens. And androgens are the hormones, the reproductive hormones that we typically see in higher amounts in males. Because our PCOS patients are experiencing insulin resistance, they're making more insulin, and that higher level of insulin is causing our body to produce more testosterone. And those higher amounts of testosterone are then causing issues like infertility, irregular periods, belly fat, facial hair. It all goes back to this insulin resistance that PCOS patients are experiencing. So the Mediterranean diet has been shown really effective in PCOS patients and in non-PCOS patients at addressing those metabolic and inflammation concerns that I mentioned occur in addition to the reproductive system concerns with PCOS. The Mediterranean diet is rich in what we call monounsaturated fats from olive oil, from nuts. The Mediterranean diet is also high in fiber and antioxidants that we get from fruit, from vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and those antioxidants and the fiber play a major role in lowering our inflammation and stabilizing our blood sugar levels. And then we also get omega-3s from the Mediterranean diet. This again is a specific type of unsaturated fat, and we oftentimes get omega-3s from fish and nuts, and they have also been shown to further reduce inflammation in the body. And that is, again, really important because inflammation can be another major driver of insulin resistance. While there is a lot of support for the Mediterranean diet in PCOS patients, the Monash guidelines that I mentioned at the beginning of this video also recommend that any dietary plan that you follow should be personalized and sustainable. This video is not going to be about quitting your job, moving to the south of Italy, hiring a chef to eat the perfect Mediterranean diet. Although if you can, that sounds awesome. You should do it. This video is really about how to incorporate the principles of the Mediterranean diet in your real life. So the diet is actually mostly plant-based and recommends you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, especially leafy greens, every single day. You should be consuming whole grains like whole wheat bread, quinoa, couscous, and legumes like beans and lentils. Healthy fats, especially olive oil as your primary fat, and some nuts and seeds, and the Mediterranean diet recommends that you mostly season your food with herbs and spices, not table salt. The Mediterranean diet says you should eat fish 2 to 3 times per week. Most of your other servings of meat should be chicken, and you should save red meat for maybe just once or twice a month. Low-fat dairy can be consumed in moderation, and eggs should be included a couple of times a week. Mediterranean diet also contains moderate red wine consumption, but for PCOS specifically, the international guidelines have said you should skip the red wine and get the polyphenols from green tea instead. Sorry. The Mediterranean diet also recommends regular physical activity, lots of water, and slow meals with family, friends, companions as often as possible. So as I mentioned, in practice, this oftentimes looks really similar to the My Plate guidelines that the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends. So in practice, it's about half your plate, colorful vegetables and fruits. Things like spinach, tomatoes, berries, citrus. Deeply colored fruits and vegetables are better than the light colored fruits and vegetables. For instance, iceberg lettuce or romaine lettuce, those are kind of light green colored lettuces. And what they would recommend is doing more like spinach, kale, if you like it, collards, those deeper green leafy greens, because they are going to have more of those plant compounds that are more anti-inflammatory. A quarter of your plate should be protein. Again, fish, chicken, beans, lentils, maybe even tofu. About a quarter of your plate should be grains. So whole grains or legumes. Quinoa, farro, barley, chickpeas, couscous, those sorts of dense carbohydrates that are going to be high in fiber. You'll also want to add extra virgin olive oil fairly generously and include nuts and seeds pretty often. Now, especially for people with insulin resistance, like most people with PCOS, it also helps to pair your carbohydrates with a protein or a fat or maybe both to even further slow down that carbohydrate digestion. Things like hummus, maybe a little bit of cheese. If you've been here before, you already know this, but for those of you that are new, yes, I'm a registered dietitian, but I don't really cook. I don't really like to cook. I prefer to just put components of meals together. And I think that is still possible while following the Mediterranean diet. So what that might really look like in a day, I would start at breakfast with a low-fat Greek yogurt, a plain Greek yogurt. I always recommend plain because the flavored ones, when they add the fruit in, they also add some sweetener, some sugar in there. I would just prefer, and it's going to be better for your health and your insulin resistance, to cut as much added sugar out of your diet as possible. I would add a bunch of berries on top. Then I would also put some walnuts or some pecans on top. And I might even throw a small portion of some dark chocolate chips on top as well. For lunch, I would have something like a lentil quinoa grain bowl. I say lentil and quinoa because when you put them together, they make a complete protein, just like a meat. They're going to have everything in there that a meat would. It's just coming from two different plant sources. Those are also both whole grains. So again, you're going to be getting some good fiber in there that is going to slow down your carbohydrate digestion. I would probably add some things like tomatoes, cucumbers, maybe some lemon juice for some flavor, feta, and I would put something like chicken or maybe even tuna on that salad as my protein, maybe even tofu. Any of that would totally work. For greens, if I wanted some greens in that salad, I would pick something like spinach. I personally don't really like kale, so spinach could go in there really easily. For dinner, I like to get like frozen salmon burgers. I think that would be a really nice way to have some fish without having to necessarily cook fish. I would have it for dinner, so I wasn't making fish at the office, right? But I might do something like a salmon burger. I could put it on a spinach salad, or I would maybe choose a whole wheat bun. And then I would have some roasted veggies on the side, like depending on what's in season, what's fresh, maybe like some broccoli, some Brussels sprouts, some asparagus, some cauliflower, zucchini, whatever, right? Some roasted veggies on the side, sauteed, roasted with some olive oil, put some seasoning on top, some herbs, some spices to give it a little bit of flavor. Maybe even make like a tzatziki sauce out of that Greek yogurt to put on top of my salmon burger. And then for snacks, I mean, I'm going to have snacks every day for sure. I might do like hummus with veggies or whole grain crackers, something like that. I might even do something classic, something old school, like apples and peanut butter, celery and peanut butter. You could do something like cottage cheese with everything bagel seasoning, cottage cheese with some fruit on top, an olive tapenade plate if you're into olives, just as good as olive oil. You could do like avocado toast with an egg on top, avocado toast with some feta on top. So that's kind of how I would structure my day without having to do a ton of cooking. If you are into the canned fish craze these days, they do sell a lot of those tinned fish in olive oil. So that could be a really handy thing to keep in your pantry. Open up, maybe have on some toast, have on some whole grain crackers. So I think there's a lot of things that you could do to build a Mediterranean diet that don't have to be overly complicated, even overly expensive, and they're still going to be useful in helping manage your PCOS. Now, remember, consistency is going to beat restriction. So make sure that you are incorporating those Mediterranean type principles into your real life with foods that you actually enjoy, that you could see yourself eating, for the rest of time potentially, because you are likely going to be managing your PCOS for the rest of time. I actually made a whole 7-day meal plan that you can download for free. I will link to it down in the description of this video. Again, that is guidance. That is a place for you to start and then customize from there with the foods that you really enjoy. So it's going to be a free 7-day Mediterranean diet plan. If you found this video helpful, I would so appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. That really helps. And if you don't have the time or the desire to see a registered dietitian, but you want some guidance and some support on managing your health, that's what this channel is really about. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe to the channel. I will have more PCOS and more insulin related content coming up. And if you are particularly interested in hearing more about how insulin resistance and PCOS really have this relationship, you can watch this video next. Thanks for being here.